It was not a bomb. It was not a missile. It was not a stealth aircraft or a carrier strike group or a bunker-busting weapon dropped from 50,000 feet. The most consequential weapon America deployed against Iran in the 2026 war had no explosive. It made no sound when it fired. It left no crater. And Iran, for all its decades of preparation, for all its underground missile cities and its layered air defense networks and its proxy militias and its hardened command bunkers, had absolutely no counter to it. The weapon was software. Specifically, it was the Palantir Maven Smart System, an artificial intelligence targeting platform that fused satellite imagery, drone feeds, radar data, and signals intelligence into a single interface and compressed what had previously taken human analysts 48,000 discrete military targets across Iran before most of the world had finished reading the morning news about what had started. To understand what the Maven Smart System actually did in this conflict, you have to understand the problem it was designed to solve. Modern military targeting, before artificial intelligence, was a slow and labor-intensive process. An intelligence analyst would receive satellite imagery of a potential against signals intelligence, radar emissions, communications intercepts, vehicle movements, to assess whether the target was currently occupied and what kind of activity was ongoing. They would consult with legal advisors to assess whether the target was a legitimate military objective under the laws of armed conflict. They would calculate collateral damage estimates. They would recommend a weapon, a time of day, and an angle of attack. All of that for a single target could take 24 to 48 hours in the traditional targeting cycle. Now multiply that by 1,000 targets. With human analysts working at traditional speed, striking 1,000 targets in the first 24 hours of a conflict is not operationally possible. There simply are not enough analysts working fast enough to build 1,000 targeting packages in a single day. Maven solved that problem by doing the analysis in seconds and presenting human commanders with a completed recommendation. Target classification, weapon selection, sequencing, legal justification for each of those 1,000 targets, ready for human approval, in the time it would have taken a traditional team to process the first dozen. Like and subscribe right now, because that is not an incremental improvement in military capability. It is a generational leap that changed what a single day of combat can accomplish. Project Maven, the U.S. military initiative that eventually became the Maven Smart System, began in 2017 as a relatively modest effort to use machine learning to analyze drone video footage for counterterrorism operations. The initial problem was simple in concept and enormous in scale. American drones were generating vast quantities of video footage over conflict zones in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Somalia, and there were not enough human analysts to watch all of it in real time. Computer vision algorithms could be trained to detect specific objects, vehicles, weapons, people in tactical configurations, far faster than a human eye, freeing analysts to focus on the footage that the algorithm had flagged as significant rather than watching hours of empty desert. That initial application proved the concept. Over the following 8 years, the program expanded dramatically in both capability and scope. By 2023, it had been designated as a formal program of record and adopted by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. By 2024, Anthropic's Claude large language model was merged into the system, providing a reasoning engine capable of synthesizing multiple intelligence streams, generating natural language summaries of battlefield situations, and simulating attack scenarios at speeds no human team could match. By early 2026, the combined system, Maven's EO, sensor fusion and target classification layer working together with Claude's reasoning and natural language interface, was embedded across all U.S. combatant commands, processing classified intelligence from Army, Navy, Air Force, and space-based assets simultaneously. Hit, like, and subscribe. Because what that system became by the time Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28, 2026, was something the 2017 drone video project would not have recognized as the same technology. Palantir's chief technology officer, Sham Sankar, went on Bloomberg TV in March 2026 and said something that will be quoted in military history books for decades. The Iran War would be remembered as the first major conflict where artificial intelligence played a central role. He was not speaking hypothetically. The operational evidence behind that claim was specific and documented. The Maven Smart System generated hundreds of strike coordinates within the first 24 hours of the conflict, enabling the strikes on more than 1,000 targets across Iran before dawn on March 1st. CENTCOM. Commander Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed the use of what he called a variety of advanced AI tools, describing how these systems helped U.S. forces sift through vast amounts of data in seconds, allowing commanders to make smarter decisions faster than the enemy can react. Craig Jones, a kill chain expert who has studied military targeting for 2 decades, put the technical achievement in terms that required no military background to understand. Maven reduced a massive human workload of tens of thousands of hours into seconds and minutes. Operations that would have unfolded over weeks in previous conflicts were executed rapidly and simultaneously. The kill chain, the military term for the sequence of steps from target identification to weapons employment, had been compressed, in Jones's words, to a level much quicker in some ways than the speed of thought. Like and subscribe. Because a kill chain faster than human thought is not science fiction from 2050. It was operational reality on February 28, 2026. The specific technical architecture of what Maven did during Epic Fury is worth understanding in detail, because it explains why Iran's preparation was so comprehensively inadequate. Maven operate ESIS as what defense analysts call a sensor fusion layer, a system that simultaneously ingests data streams from sources that previously required separate analytical teams to process. Satellite imagery from commercial and classified constellations. Real-time drone feeds from Reaper and newer autonomous systems flying over Iranian territory. Signals, intelligence from electronic warfare, aircraft monitoring, Iranian radar emissions, communications, and electronic signatures. Radar data from naval vessels and airborne warning systems. All of it, every stream from every sensor, processed simultaneously and fused into a single operational picture that updates in near real time. Against that fused picture, the system applies computer vision algorithms trained on years of imagery to classify what it is seeing. This building contains radar equipment. This vehicle is a mobile missile launcher. This compound shows personnel movement patterns consistent with an active command post. It then cross-references those classifications against a pre-built database of known Iranian military infrastructure, a database assembled over years of peacetime surveillance to determine whether a target is active, what its current operational status appears to be, and what weapon is most appropriate for its destruction. Palantir's artificial intelligence platform, working on top of that sensor fusion layer, allows military operators to query the entire picture in natural language. An intelligence officer can type a question in plain English, find all active radar stations within 200 kilometers of Bandar Abbas, and receive a ranked, mapped, prioritized list of results within seconds. Claude's reasoning engine drafts a targeting justification for each result, assessing the military objective, the likely collateral damage, and the legal basis for the strike under the laws of armed conflict. The human commander reviews the recommendation, approves or rejects it, and the targeting package goes to the weapons platform. Hit like and subscribe. Because that complete cycle, from query to weapons employment, was running in 15 to 45 minutes in Iran's skies, for categories of targets that the traditional process would have taken 24 to 48 hours to process. The result of that compression, 48 hours, reduced to 15 minutes, meant something specific in operational terms, that assumption that the defending force has time. Time to detect that strikes are beginning and alert subordinate units. Time to disperse forces and equipment away from fixed facilities before the second wave arrives. Time to relocate command posts and cycle running at human speed. The cycle Iran had studied and prepared for based on American operations in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. All of those responses were possible. Disperse the missiles before the next wave. Move the commander before they find the new location. Shift to alternate communications. Iran had built its entire military doctrine around the assumption that time was available and that survival came from using it. Maven eliminated that assumption. When the targeting cycle runs in 15 minutes instead of 48 hours, there's no time to disperse before the second wave arrives. There's no time to move the commander before the new location is already on a target list. There's no time to shift to alternate communications because the alternate communications nodes are already classified, ranked, and recommended for destruction by the time the primary ones go dark. The Arms Control Association's assessment captured this precisely. Maven's speed in selecting and reselecting targets represents a distinct combat advantage, allowing U.S. forces to disable Iranian combat capabilities swiftly and incessantly, preventing their reconstitution. Prevention of reconstitution is the key phrase. It means that Iran could not recover from one wave of strikes before the next wave had already been planned, approved, and executed against the targets it was trying to. The decapitation campaign against Iran's leadership structure, which killed 52 senior officials in 40 days, was the application of Maven's pattern of life analysis, where the system's capability extends beyond infrastructure targeting into a domain that has historically required years of patient human intelligence work. A senior official at WHO moves between safe houses and avoids predictable schedules has traditionally been extremely difficult to locate and strike in a compressed time frame. Maven changes that calculation by continuously processing every available data stream for signals associated with that individual, phone metadata patterns, electronic emissions from devices associated with their known entourage, vehicle movement patterns visible from satellite imagery, communications intercepts from the networks around them, It does not need to find the official directly. It needs to find the pattern that indicates where they are likely to be, with enough confidence to justify a targeting recommendation within a window short enough that the recommendation remains valid when the strike is executed. The killing of Admiral Tangsiri and his entire Naval Command staff in a Bandar Abbas apartment at 3 a.m, after 2 previously failed attempts, reflects exactly this kind of sustained pattern of life tracking applied to a target who believed his security protocols were sufficient. They were sufficient against the traditional human speed intelligence cycle. They were not sufficient against a system that was processing every available signal continuously, looking for the pattern that would reveal his location with enough precision and confidence to justify a strike. Hit, like, and subscribe. Because the question of what makes a high-value target locatable to an AI-assisted targeting system is now the most important operational security question facing military commanders in every country on Earth. The ethical dimension of what Maven did in Iran is the part of this story that the headlines covered most intensively, and that deserves honest examination, because it is real and important, and does not disappear just because the operational achievements were extraordinary. On February 28, 2026, the very first day of Operation Epic Fury, a U.S. airstrike hit the Shajare Tayyibeh Elementary School in Manab, killing more than 165 civilians, the majority of them children. The school had been on a target list generated with AI assistance. Officials said afterward that outdated intelligence had contributed to the targeting error. The location may previously have been associated with military activity, and the database classification had not been updated. The Pentagon announced an investigation. Maven's reported accuracy in target classification hovers around 60% in some assessments, compared with 84% for human analysts working at traditional speed. The critical question that the Manab school strike raised is 45 minutes per target, at a pace of 1,000 targets per day. What does human oversight actually mean? At 1,000 targets in 24 hours, the average time available per targeting decision is approximately 86 seconds. A commander approving a strike in 86 seconds on an AI-generated recommendation, supported by an AI-drafted legal justification, is making a fundamentally different kind of decision than one who has reviewed 48 hours of intelligence analysis. David Leslie, professor of ethics at Queen Mary University of London, described the result as cognitive offloading. Human decision-makers feel detached from the consequences because the analytical labor was performed by a machine. The system generates the recommendation, the human signs it, the weapon fires, the accountability extremely difficult to apply. Like and subscribe, because the Manab School is the other side of the story that no honest account of what Maven did in Iran can omit, and it is a problem that will outlast this conflict. The geopolitical implications of what Maven demonstrated in Iran extend far beyond the bilateral US-Iran conflict, and they are already reshaping defense procurement decisions in Beijing, Moscow, Pyongyang, and every other capital that watched the 2026 war and drew its own conclusions. China has been running what analysts describe as its own AI. Systems are too unreliable to use. The operational results were too decisive for that conclusion to be sustainable. The lesson was that the next peer-level conflict will be an AI versus AI competition, where the side whose machine learning models can process intelligence faster, fuse more sensor streams, and generate more accurate targeting recommendations will hold the decisive, according to reporting from defense journals tracking procurement announcements from the PLA. Russia drew parallel conclusions. Its own AI targeting programs, which have been deployed at a much more limited scale in Ukraine, are now being evaluated against the Maven benchmark. The 2026 Iran war did no subscribe, because what Maven did in 24 hours in Iran has started an arms race in artificial intelligence that is going to define military technology for the next 20 years. Stating that AI tools are not 100% reliable, they can fail in subtle ways, and yet operators continue to overtrust them. Representative Jacobs and other members of the House Armed Services Committee requested classified briefings on the role Maven played in the Manab school strike specifically and in the broader targeting process generally. International law scholars review time to 86 seconds per target was structurally incompatible with the requirements of international humanitarian law, which demands genuine human judgment in targeting decisions rather than machine. Conflict were accurate. They would raise serious questions about proportionality and precaution requirements under the laws of Europed, told the BBC directly that it is not our role to decide life or death. AI platforms like Maven have been instrumental to the management of the conflict, but responsibility always remains with the military organization. That answer satisfied the that its AI-generated target list had selected for destruction. Like and subscribe. Because the gap between the operational achievement and the human cost of that achievement is not a gap that goes away when the war ends. It is the central unresolved question of the first AI war in history, and it is going to be litigated, legally, politically, and morally, for decades. Iran had no answer for any of it. It attempted to strike back in the cyber domain. Iranian-aligned groups attacked AWS data centers and information domain using AI tools of its own to scan for vulnerabilities in U.S. critical infrastructure. It launched missile barrages, drone attacks, and Hormuz harassment operations. None of those responses changed what was happening in the targeting cycle. The AI-assisted kill chain does not depend on any Iran attempted. Iran's IRGC spent decades building an asymmetric military designed to defeat a conventionally superior American force by exploiting the seams in human speed decision-making, by moving faster than American analysts could track, by dispersing faster than American targeting and the Minab school stand as permanent evidence of the system's limitations, but sufficiently that Iran's military doctrine, which had been refined against a slower adversary, failed against the adversary that actually showed up on February 28th, the weapon. Had planned for a war against American bombs, and what arrived was a war against American algorithms. And by the time the algorithms had processed the first 24 hours, 1,000 Iranian targets were already gone. Hit like and subscribe and share this video, because the first AI war in history happened in Iran in 2026, and the lessons it taught about speed, targeting ethics, and what the next war will look like are lessons every military on Earth is studying right now.